And we are live on our third night of Republican National Convention coverage. 2 down, 2 to go. My name is Matt Binder of Doomed.
And I'm Jared Holt from Shitpost.
And we're going to do this. We're going to get through. Here we go, right? I mean, I can't believe we've made it this far.
I know, and like every night is getting later and later, and we talked about last night. Surely someone at the RNC is watching this show and thinking like, "Oh, these young leftist boys, we have to tire them out so their takes are less developed." But I saw Trump sort of come out after Pence was done speaking, and my stomach did twist in a knot. I kept thinking like, at any point he was just going to grab the mic and then we were going to be up until like 3 a.m. tonight trying to break this down. So I guess there are some silver linings to the evening.
Right. I could have seen him do that, I guess, but I felt like he wasn't going to pull that because he would upstage himself. Trump's big night is tomorrow. Everyone's looking forward to the main event. On Thursday night, Donald Trump, the final speaker, the headliner. Why would he upstage himself the night before? And, then tomorrow there's people who have to go on after that. And then he's got to outdo himself in the final. He's got to outdo tonight's impromptu speech with tomorrow night's prepared speech. He wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you might be right. But I saw him coming down the runway and I was like, okay, he's just saying hi. And then he starts walking up the stairs and I was like, oh, please don't. He walks up to the podium where Pence is and I'm just like, no, please. Like, we'll stay up tomorrow. I'm sure Trump is going to run over time like he always does at everything I've ever seen him talk at. He just blows through the time constraint. But, I don't know, man. It's such a weird reaction to have to like see him walking towards a podium and just like be staring at the clock and like looking at the alarms and like figuring out when I have to wake up tomorrow to work and just being like, oh, come on, please, just like this once, I'm begging you, do not talk.
Right. Yeah. It's tomorrow. We will be up late. I can assure you. Tomorrow. I mean, what is it right now? We're starting. Pence went what? It's like 11:15, 11:20. By the time we got this feed up, it's 11:30. Tomorrow we probably won't get started till I'm going to assume midnight.
Yeah. I'm just posting in for the long haul. We've been trying to keep these about an hour, give or take some minutes, just so we don't exhaust ourselves and spill out every single take that we could ever have, or just wear ourselves out, frankly. But I think tomorrow night's going to be a late one for us.
Right. Man, it'll be worth it. And I'm happy that everyone who's tuned in to the live stream right now at youtube.com/MattBinder and everyone who listens to the audio podcast version, whether it be at doomedpod.com or at, go ahead, Jared, get your plug in.
At shtpost.substack.com.
There you go. There you go. Right.
Shitpost on your podcast feeds. The I in shitpost is an exclamation point. I did it so that I could make that the name on iTunes, and every day I regret it a little bit more because it's harder to find. It
is very confusing, and that's okay. I like it better that way because then people just give up and look for Doomed, I'm sure. So,
oh, we'll have some words after this, Matt.
Right. So, being that we are live on my YouTube channel, you can drop a super chat in the live chat. And it can be a question, a comment, and I will read it on this live show. And if it's a question, Jared and I will do our very best to answer it. So we'll give people time to get that in. We've had some few good questions the past couple of days, so looking forward to another few good questions. Yeah, but let's get started here. Let's dive in here. And one thing I noticed about this was it just me, or I know we were talking about how it the night went long in terms of when Pence got up there, and now we're starting at 11:30. But while we were watching, at least before Pence took the stage, I felt like everything moved quicker. Like I was actually shocked when Pence took the stage because I was like, wait, that's it? The night's done? I didn't feel that way the past two nights. I don't know if they're packing it in tighter. I did notice that I think there were a lot more speakers tonight. They just all spoke a lot less. Perhaps that's what made it feel like it went by quicker. Because the past two nights, some people felt like they were going on forever with their speeches.
Yeah, and tonight it seemed like they had more videos recorded at off-site locations, so maybe the variety made it feel like it was going faster versus those first two nights of, speech in this empty auditorium, cutscene. Speech in this empty auditorium, cutscene. It was like speech in the empty auditorium. Oh, and here's Joni Ernst out in, I think it's Iowa, talking from a farm. Oh, here's, a hype video of Mike Pence talking somewhere else, and maybe there was just some more visual variety or something, but I kind of had the same sense. It did feel like time moved a bit quicker on this night.
Right. I also noticed a theme. Again, I think there's these themes every night. Last night, your theme was that we were hearing about this non-existent Trump that does like this man who's not Donald Trump, who they're talking about is Donald Trump. Right? That was what your takeaway was yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. And I've got a fresh one for today.
I do as well. Why don't you go first? Go ahead. What did you think the theme of tonight was?
Tonight we all learned about girl boss Trump. Trump loves women so much. Definitely did not make comments about grabbing them by the pussy or anything like that.
Jared, why would you say such a thing?
Pardon my language. I feel like the rhetoric was, it's been sort of existential throughout the whole convention, but tonight especially, you had a lot of speakers kind of pose this as like this is not a necessarily partisan election. This is like an existential election. Do you want America to be America or to be taken over by the radical socialist left?
Right.
Which has been around as campaign messaging forever, but it was especially pronounced tonight. Right. We'll talk about the individual speeches more in a second, but Vice President Mike Pence said something to the degree of like, you will not be safe in Joe Biden's America. And I think that is certainly, especially on the heels of, some 17-year-old militia wannabe shooting and killing two people in Wisconsin, it's alarming to me.
Right. And your first half there about the it being Women for Trump night, I guess that's a great point. I really I think probably subconsciously I felt that, but it didn't occur to me that was a theme. And looking through this guest list, it seems like there were a lot of Republican women, I should say, on tonight's show broadcast. So that certainly was a theme. But on your second half, that's where I was sort of feeling the night went. And furthermore, actually, my specific theme that I felt tonight was that the election was the challenger, Donald Trump, versus the incumbent, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
They spoke.
Yeah, you put it better than I could have right there, but they absolutely agree.
They spoke about the past 4 years as if Donald Trump wasn't the guy in charge. Like, all this stuff hasn't been happening under Trump. They, like you mentioned, they mentioned the protests and, the unrest in the country. And they treated it like Donald Trump has no say over any of this. And Joe Biden does. One person, actually, specifically, I think I tweeted this out, GOP Representative Elise Stefanik. She's a House member from the great state of New York. She said something to the effect of, America has a choice in this election, Donald Trump versus the failed leftist policy of the past 47 years. Donald Trump, whatever you want to break down about Joe Biden and leftist policy and him not being leftist, and also 47 years, going back all 47 years. Let's just stick with the fact that Donald Trump has been president for 4 years already. I mean, what past 47 years? At the very least, she would have had to have said the 47 years before the 4 years that Donald Trump just was president for. I mean, literally, they don't make any sense.
Right. And this idea that Joe Biden is a leftist today is laughable. But for 47 years, are you kidding me? Are you like, we don't have to go very far back in Joe Biden's history to see him like eulogizing segregationists and like, that sort of stuff. Joe Biden is hardly passes the leftist sniff test.
So you're voting for Trump, Jared?
It would be the pivot of a lifetime. This would be a great time to announce it, right? I watched the RNC, and on night 3, I became convinced. I'm a walk-away Democrat.
If you didn't get what I was saying, what you just said, if you said that online, it would be greeted with about 50 replies of people going, "Oh, so you're going to vote for Donald Trump then, huh?" Like, if you say anything slightly critical of Joe Biden, even if you plan on voting for the guy, you're automatically met with, "Oh, so I guess you're just a Trump supporter then."
Which I think is ridiculous. We should scrutinize the candidate, yes, right? Because whatever issues that people on the left are going to find with Joe Biden, for damn sure the Republicans are going to find and charge at him at full speed. So it is beneficial to hear the concerns first from the left and try to, repair them or figure out making amends somehow before, the national stage explodes with it.
Right. And before we dive too deep into the speeches, I just got to say, because I just thought of it now, apparently the entire Beltway listened to our show last night's RNC breakdown, because I woke up this morning and all the talk was about why the Hatch Act matters. And I want to once again reiterate what my feelings on this were, and it was that yes, reporters should report this out, and people should care about these issues. My making fun of was strictly on the people who bring that up as if that should be like game set match for Donald Trump, like that Bronze Hammer tweet where it's like, "I'd like to see old Donnie Trump wriggle his way out of this one. Nevertheless." You know what I'm talking about? Like, that's right. Those are the people I'm making fun of, not the people who are literally reporting on the fact that Donald Trump is a grifter and a scam artist and doing very illegal things to promote his campaign. But the Hatch Act! Let's continue.
The Hatch Act, man. Yeah, I mean, the Hatch Act is such a small thing compared to just the the middle finger that the Trump administration's thrown up to the rule of law during office. It seems silly.
It really does feel like the people who get most upset about the Hatch Act are the ones who are oh, well, gotta hand it to Donald Trump for taking out Soleimani. You know what I mean? Like, Soleimani, whatever his pronunciation
under any
is.
Circumstances have to hand it to him.
Right. And let's use that to segue into the fact that tonight, I think 2 or 3 speakers, I think Pence did as well, mentioned Trump taking out the Iranian general Soleimani, as if, and they bring it up as if like the same, and I think I even saw, Ken Klippenstein shared this on Twitter. I was thinking about it before him, Ken. I'm not stealing your thought, but I'm just saying that we had a mind meld where they sort of treat it like the American people will hear that and go like, just like how Obama took out Osama bin Laden. Trump took out Soleimani. No one in this country knows who he is. But, right. I mean, like, it's not Osama bin Laden to the American people. It is not.
Right. Like, the news came where it's like, we killed Soleimani. And then people were like, huh? What? Who? And then, like, they learned a little bit about who he was. And they're like, oh, I guess that's good. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
It was the same people. It was literally
Like
the same people.
I certainly didn't know who this guy was.
How do you not know who Soleimani is? It was like that.
Anyway, this is an RNC show. Let's dive right into it.
Well, we just were with the Soleimani thing. That's, to me, that was like unbelievable that they're like because that's how little they got to pump up Trump. Because even the things that another common thing we heard tonight, and we've been hearing obviously throughout the whole thing, what he did for the economy and what he did for the coronavirus in the past tense, as if the coronavirus no longer happened, is no longer happening, I should say. But tonight it really hit me. Every time they brought up his historic economy, again, they're citing figures from before the pandemic. They are living in a time that no longer exists. I mean, they generally do, usually pre-Civil War era, but they're now living in a more recent time that no longer exists. It is sort of astonishing for them to continue to pump up these stats when the reverse is true now. America's historic economy is now historically bad.
Right, and I will confess I did a hashtag resistance style tweet. I was watching sort of like Trump and Pence go greet the audience, and people are just like jammed together, no masks, trying to get pictures with either one of them, and I was like, not a lot of social distancing going here. Immediately hated myself and had to go get a beer to like try to forget that I tweeted that. But but it kind of speaks to what you're saying, like the image of the Trump administration coronavirus response is being put forward again tonight by even more powerful individuals, is this idea that like the worst of days have left us, when we still have, like, I think I didn't see any figures from today, but I heard yesterday it was something like 1,200 people died of coronavirus. So people are still actively dying from this. Maybe the infrastructure in this country has adapted a little bit to not be so overwhelmed. But this problem hasn't gone away. And until we get a vaccine, and like hopefully that vaccine is reliable and it works and it carries well, this is going to be with us for the foreseeable future.
Right. So let's now let me ask you the question I've asked you every night, and it's two questions. Who do you think had the standout speech, both as a for having the worst, and to us, I guess it would be the best speech, and for the Republicans, who would be the best speech? Like, who do you think had the speech that made them that made Trump look okay to the majority of America, and who had the speech that was just off the walls, batshit crazy?
I think my personal favorite speech was Kellyanne Conway's, if only for the line that she said, limited means does not make for limited dreams. And I like died inside, where it's like, oh, you're telling me that if I have like $3 in my bank account, or like I'm one medical emergency away from like total bankruptcy, that that's not a limit on maybe things I want to pursue, like a higher education or a new job path or something. Like, it's just so ridiculous and like condensed into the dumbest little tagline. So I got a lot of kicks out of that. For Republicans, I think one of the strongest speeches of the night had to be from Richard Grenell. I think his words on foreign policy, his offer to speak out against the foreign policy of prior administrations, even conservative administrations, as like a failure in an effort to export democracy across the world, I think resonates with a lot of public opinion in this country, and it's something that a lot of politicians don't want to talk about. So anytime someone in the room can kind of talk about the elephant that's standing there, and do so to support Trump, I think that's going to be advantageous to them.
Right, right. I guess it was just thinking about it. It was a strong speech, I guess, if you don't know who Richard Grinnell is.
Exactly. Right.
I mean,
And
this guy,
I would think that most people don't, which is
right,
sort of the thing.
right. So that's why we're going to educate them right now, Jared. For people who are unaware, the guy who was talking about the failed foreign policy of previous administrations, even Republican administrations, specifically the Bush administration, because he brought up Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, I mean, Richard Grinnell, this is the guy who literally worked under John Bolton and was basically was a spokesperson for Bush during that same time period, talking up the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. So good thing he's the guy to go out there and talk about it.
Right, and if he wants to make amends, sure, whatever, great. But
I don't think that's what he's doing, Jared.
I don't think that's what he's doing either. I think it's a very cynical political move. But I think out of all of them, tonight I was also underwhelmed by speeches, like previous nights that I expected to be like totally off the wall, like Laura Trump. She has been interviewed by all kinds of like weird fringe podcasts, has kind of like courted the little sideshow that comes along with the Trump movement on behalf of the campaign. People like Joni Ernst, people like that Madison Cawthorn kid. That guy's a load of work. I kind of expected things to be a little bit more intense.
Right. They were underwhelming, especially Laura Trump. I'm gonna disagree with you on Madison and the kid who's about to become the youngest congressperson in history, I believe. Right. We'll get to him in a second, but yeah, Laura Trump was definitely underwhelming. I was expecting her to, like you said, she's basically how much the Trump campaign pays her close to $200,000 to basically be their main media spokesperson or liaison. Like, she's constantly out there doing interviews. She's the host of their live streams whenever they do official campaign live streams. She is like their what's his face, the guy who used to host American Idol. I'm having a mental block.
Ryan Seacrest.
She is their Ryan Seacrest. Thank you. So I expected her to really, obviously Ryan Seacrest, if he went out there and talked up the latest conspiracy theories and spread misinformation every night. But I expected her to go up there and sort of steal the show with just her, whatever she would say. And she didn't do that. In fact, I would say her speech was probably one of the more forgettable ones. Joni Ernst, also I expected her to be a little bit more off the wall, but she lost she lost the stereotypical Karen hairdo, so that's why she's probably her brain is now forming fully. For those who don't know, Joni Ernst used to have like the short Karen hair, the classic hairdo that you see the typical Karens have. And now she grew it out. So, I guess, some air is getting through to her. Okay. But anyway, one thing she did say that was funny to me was that Joe Biden is going to, ban animal farms and, ban animal farms, right? Wasn't that what she said? Ban,
and abolish fossil fuels.
Which, the last one, I'm all aboard. I know the first one is probably not come entirely, but the second one we could totally 100% do right now. We should do it. Let's do it.
So you said you disagreed with me on Madison Cawthorn, and to me his speech kind of struck me with like a Dave Rubin style type thing. There was a big to-do that he made about how like the modern left is like thinking with its emotions instead of its logic or its ration on what's actually beneficial to them, and made this big thing where it's like, I welcome liberals, true liberals, to come engage with us in our ideas, and we should define what we support and win the argument. And I was just like, oh my God, it's the Rubin Report. I'm watching the Rubin Report at the RNC. But I'm curious, you know, you said that kind of it did stand out to you, and it wasn't like kind of as cringy or as snoozy for you. So I'm curious, kind of what parts of that speech you saw, or like what stood out to you in that.
Okay, there are two things specifically. There's probably a few other things, but let's get to the main two. One, and this is what I think is, I'm sure the Republican base ate this shit up because they love those feel good Facebook video share moments when he got up out of his wheelchair to stand up for the United States of America. They're gonna love that. I mean, to me, that's probably going to be the thing. And I'm not. It's unfortunate what happened to him. I'm not at all. But they're gonna eat this up, and without a doubt, they know that type of stuff. I'm sure if he wasn't planning on doing it, they would have asked him to do it. And the second thing was, and this really struck me. This might be the moment that sticks with me specifically. Here you have this guy, a Republican, has the typical young Republican look, the fash haircut, the preppy young Republican jawline, and he's up there on the stage, and he has the audacity to talk about, how the Republican Party is going to is the one that truly represents Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. And this is the guy, and he went on to talk about MLK's dream and to judge a man by his character, and that's what the Republican Party stands for. And as he's saying this, all I could think of was the guy who's name dropping MLK's name on that stage is the same guy who a few weeks ago was outed for having posted on Instagram a year or two ago photos of him visiting the Eagle's Nest, and talking up how what an honor it was for him to be where the Führer was, and how the I think he called them like the ultimate evil. But you don't say it in that sort of way if you're demeaning someone. You sort of say that in a way if you are like a young supervillain aspiring to be the main supervillain. You know what I mean? It was just, and he deleted the post because obviously there was, when you do that, that's not something you could spin and flaunt and turn it into a positive. And so the guy up there talking about MLK was the same guy who did that. And then also I've been seeing some new reports that just have come by that actually someone sent me as he was on stage, where he has I'm going to get more into it, so I'm not going to dive fully in right now because we don't have enough time to give this topic the amount of time it deserves. But there are charges that he has been inappropriate with women in his past. So yeah, this guy who is about to become the youngest congressperson. How old is he? 25, 24, something like that?
I think he said he was 25.
25, yeah. Oh man, he's one of those like almost sure things to win. Like he's in a very heavy red district. Yeah, to me that's what made that speech stand out. Just what he said combined with what I know about him.
Right. And speaking of the sort of invocation of MLK's name, I feel like that's something we've been seeing a lot during this convention. People bringing up MLK quotes, MLK's, vision for a, post racially segregated America, that sort of thing. And sort of using that as a positive to spin for Trump, which is kind of ludicrous given how Trump has gone on so many different like racist attacks against his opponents, has invoked white nationalist rhetoric, has like demonized black and brown people in this country. And then to have people, at one point, even during the night, like a civil rights activist come out, invoke this image of MLK or invoke, the fight for desegregation and racial equality in the name of Trump was that really rubbed me a weird way. It felt very sort of disingenuous and cynical. And to repeat my overarching take from last night, it's an image of Trump that I simply just don't recognize. And I think a lot of people just don't recognize.
Right. Right. No, that it's a Trump that is not, is not the Trump that lives in the reality that we live in. So we're at the halfway point here. So I think what we should do is let's get to some super chats, and then we'll jump right back into the to our breakdown. So Renee says, as we say in Chile, I wish we lived in the imaginary country the fash lie about. Right. The idea that we're, the Democratic Party is some leftist party, and there's a revolution happening in the streets right now. It's ludicrous. Neither of those things are true. And I don't say this to demean the protesters who are in the streets, obviously. I'm just saying that the good work they're doing, unfortunately, is not enough to give the revolution of the Republicans are putting forward. That's not what's happening. Megan Tastic says, Hatch Act! That's literally the super chat.
What's it?
Hatch Act!
Hatch Act. Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Can we get a Hatch Act going in the chat, folks?
Right, yeah. I like that. More.
I'm going to arrest Matt Binder for violating the Hatch Act.
Right. Send me more super chat money with just the words Hatch Act. Ron with a super chat. Richard Grenell is a master of doublespeak, praising Trump for being anti-war while simultaneously praising Trump for being pro-war. Right, this big, strong president apparently hasn't lifted a finger, according to them, right? Or has actually even brought our troops home, which is also a lie. In fact, he has sent more troops. It is true that Trump hasn't really started any war of his own. What he has done is he's beefed up the existing wars overseas with even more troops.
Right, and Richard Grenell also is very good at doublespeak on LGBT issues with the Trump administration. He is one of those people that claims that Trump is the most pro-gay, LGBT president in history, and then also at the same time will kind of flout these protections for quote unquote religious freedom or provider choice, which are ultimately, at the end of the day, effectively permission slips to discriminate and, deny services or, vending to people of LGBT communities.
Right.
Yeah. So really good observation there.
JH with a big super chat here, the $10 super chat. When do we as Democrats resort to violence? The police are 100% on the side of vile scum. When the election doesn't go our way, what do we do? I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna attempt to take that one in the most, without getting banned from YouTube. I'm gonna take that one. Normally, I would say this, that the thing is that the vast majority of people in this country who vote, at least, are just too comfortable. So that'll never happen. When it comes down to it, the people who have the most to gain from the system being turned on its head literally can't take the time to do it because they're working all the time and they're raising a family all the time. They have no extra time. They're working a minimum wage job. They just got to do what they got to do for their own family to survive. They come first. And the people who can do something about it are just too comfortable. However, we are in unprecedented times right now. Normally, I wouldn't say that during a pandemic. I do think that if things don't fundamentally change when those evictions start rolling through the country, I don't know what it's going to be, but I think we're going to see something happen in terms of just, you're seeing it now with these protests. Sure, there's been mass protests when there's been other instances of police brutality. You've seen it before. there's, Black Lives Matter started under the Obama administration. What was it, 2015? But the sustained ability for these protesters to be out in many different cities in this country every night in such large numbers, and also on top of that, you're seeing these protests happen in towns where these sort of things don't usually happen. These protests don't usually form. I do think, we're seeing something that is a product of the pandemic. I'm not, people would obviously have been upset over George Floyd's murder and there would have been mass protests, but I think we're seeing it taken to the next level because we're also dealing with the pandemic. And, I don't know what happens in the next step, the obvious next step, which is when the evictions come through. And obviously anything the economy is, any comeback the economy is experiencing now, whatever little it is, I mean, it's not for the long term. I mean, we are undoubtedly going to see a rise in cases in this country bigger than it is now. In fact, we'll probably see the biggest peak, in my estimation, that this country has experienced during this coming winter, because we have not experienced a full-blown winter with the coronavirus. And despite what Pence says, I don't think there's going to be a vaccine, at least one that's going to work and be 100% effective, and apparently everyone in the country will get it by the end of the year, like he was touting.
For me, I would never encourage somebody to take proactive, violent action for politics. I think that is the last resort of last resorts, and like, you should only get there when you exhaust all other options, right? Like, shit has to be very, very bad. But we're not even close to exhausting all the options here. Part of how we got in this mess to begin with is in my opinion, there are so many different avenues and checks on powers that our government just hasn't, felt pressure to explore. There hasn't been sufficient, street movements and protests showing opposition to. And if you're concerned about some of the developments around these protests recently, the murder of 2 protesters last night by this wannabe militia kid, I am no gun-hating lib or whatever. I would say, educate yourself on firearm safety, find proper training, and if you feel comfortable and in a position, it is ingrained in our Constitution, you have a right to buy a weapon, but please learn everything you can about gun laws and gun safety if that's something you want to seriously consider. These things are just inherently dangerous by the fact of being in your house. So you need to, really make sure everything is in line if you want to take, that sort of increased effort to have a defense for yourself if you're really that worried.
All right. Yeah, folks, you heard it here, you heard it here first. Jared Holt says, go out and buy a firearm. I think I made Jared a little bit uncomfortable there. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm just joking.
I know. I'm pretty open about how I feel about guns.
Right. Yeah. I used to actually be. And I think we should take this opportunity, because I think it does feel a little bit that sort of was in the back of my mind during the RNC today that I didn't feel the previous 2 days. This is happening, right after the events that transpired late last night and earlier today happened. I think we should take a moment to actually touch upon that, because it will feel sort of weird to not. This 17-year-old man went down to the protests in Wisconsin from one state over. He's from Illinois. And what's his name again? Kyle Rittenhouse. I wrote about him today.
Something like that.
Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. That's the thing. And he was a wannabe militiaman who went and hung out with the local militia groups at the protests in Wisconsin. These protests were happening every night in Wisconsin after police shot Jacob Blake, what was it, 7 times in the back for not listening to their orders and approaching his car when they told him not to. Of course, that's obviously what you do when an unarmed black man is not listening to you. You shoot him 7 times in the back, all right? Unbelievable. And these protests have been happening nightly, and this guy goes down with his militia buddies, armed, and he gets in some sort of altercation, and he shoots someone in the face. That person died. Then there's a video going around that shows the protesters then trying to apprehend him, and they're chasing him, trying to, stop him. They are, you hear all these right-wingers out there going, because they only see that second video of people chasing him. They go, oh, he's acting in self-defense. No, actually, it was the protesters acting in self-defense, trying to stop the guy who just murdered their fellow protester. So they're approaching him, and they grab him, and he shoots one of them in the chest and another one of them in the arm. The one who gets shot in the chest also dies. So you have this 17-year-old, and his Facebook profile came out, and he's a Blue Lives Matter guy. He really has a fetish for the cops. He is like obsessed with law enforcement. And he has a TikTok video of him front and center at a Trump rally in January. And he walks up to police with his hands in the air after shooting these protesters. They walk right on by him. They just go right on by. He's just walking around with this firearm right after he's murdered 2 people just in the streets of Wisconsin. No one's doing a thing to him. No one's apprehending him. No one at all. So this morning, people online start seeing these videos from the previous night, and the word gets out of his name and his information. And, finally charges were filed, and he was apprehended back in his home in Illinois. So, he had a nice, something like 12 hours to get his ducks in a row and say howdy doody to his mom and dad, I'm sure. The same thing that all black people in this country also get the privilege to do when police arrest them and or shoot them without any reason or due process. It was just a stunning thing that went on. And then right before the RNC, you have the NBA, the MLB, and the WNBA basically shut down the players who were supposed to play tonight, a number of them being teams from Wisconsin, just going on strike basically because of this police shooting. And I'm sure the militia shooting added to the whole atmosphere that made them feel like they needed to take a stand.
Right. And you had all day, even after it was announced that the shooter was receiving first-degree intentional murder charges, which for, first degree is a hard murder charge to stick. I'm no lawyer, but, I would imagine law enforcement found something when they arrested him that, kind of got the premeditation part, sealed up. I find it hard to imagine they would go out of the gate for first degree if they didn't have something that isn't publicly available.
I've also heard that they might be purposely charging him with more than they think he could possibly get, so he doesn't. I actually would usually believe that one, but I think the evidence in this case, rarely I think do you have this amount of video evidence. I mean, you have a number of social media posts where basically this 17-year-old man was going around, basically online saying how he couldn't wait to go down there and enforce the law. And, he literally drives 30 minutes out of the way to another state, one state over, to roam the streets in this town in Wisconsin with his firearm. I mean, it doesn't get, perhaps I get why people would think that, and maybe in other cases that would be true, but I think this one is just too obvious. It doesn't get any more blatant than that's why they're charging him with the first degree murder.
And, I should say, we probably don't even have to, but was this mentioned at the RNC ever, Matt?
No.
Did this come up at all?
No, absolutely not.
Of course
because,
not.
Well, part of it's because so many of these actually are pre-taped speeches.
Right. We do have to to acknowledge that.
Right. But also, the live speeches didn't mention it. But, and I'm glad you brought this up, because something did hit me. And Mike Pence, when bringing up the protests and the unrest that has spread throughout the country in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and then after George Floyd was killed, cases from earlier in the year, and cases that have happened, incidents that have happened after, all come out and show the rest of the country again, like it's not just George Floyd. There's countless others. We just talked about Jacob Blake. We could bring up Breonna Taylor. There's just so many cases just from this year alone, really. But Pence brings up a casualty. I don't know if he used that word, but he defined this person as a casualty of the unrest. Mm-hmm. And it was a law enforcement officer named Dave Patrick Underwood. And when he said this name, I was like, that name sounds really familiar. And he's posing this as like, we won't forget about this law enforcement official who died at the hands of this unrest. And, they've built up the unrest across the country being at the hands of Democratic officials, and, the Democratic Party's responsible. And why won't Biden come out and take responsibility and apologize for the actions that are occurring under a President Trump? But, that's their thought process. So I was like, that name sounds really familiar. So I looked up Dave Patrick Underwood, and the second the stories popped up, I didn't even need to read them. I immediately remembered who Dave Patrick Underwood is. He is one of the law enforcement officials who was murdered earlier this year, shortly after the Black Lives Matter protests started after George Floyd's killing, who was murdered by a Boogaloo Boy.
Right.
He was killed by a movement, a far right-wing fringe movement that literally wants to use the protests to spark a second civil war in this country, a race war.
We just had coming out in Politico today, a couple former DHS officials, spoke out and said that they have been urging the Trump administration to pay attention to right-wing extremism and try to do something about it for years, and then eventually just quit because they were so frustrated because they just weren't interested in it. So that paired with Pence, referring to an officer that was, killed by a right-wing extremist is like an example of the unrest in Democratic-run cities. Was like at best woefully misinformed, and at worst like absolutely disgusting.
Oh, definitely not misinformed. They know what they're doing. They know you can't write a speech and put that name in there, and not say, oh, why is this name in the speech? Who is this officer? They look it up. I mean, because Pence didn't put it together, or obviously the Pence's speechwriter had to look up police officers killed during the protests. And what they'll find, actually, is there's not being a single death attributed to Antifa or the Black Lives Matter movement. There's been no murders attributed to those protesters. There's been studies done comparing the right-wing violence and the supposed left-wing violence, and these studies continuously turn up no violence in terms of life-threatening, fatal injury from the left. Yet I think it's something like in the past 2 or 3 decades, it's been something like 326 people killed at the hands of right-wing extremists. It is what I think is that the U.S. intelligence hands the Trump administration this information about these far right extremist movements and fringe groups, and they throw in the details of some of these members. And what the Trump administration probably does is they run through the spreadsheet, copy those emails from those extremist groups and paste them right into their campaign mailing list. To be quite frank, I mean, it's.
I mean, the DOJ has cracked down on some really, really intense neo-Nazi groups, but the job is far from done. By the time the DOJ, after El Paso, happened, white supremacists shot up. I think it was a Walmart. Um, it was kind of like the same situation we're seeing with QAnon now. It's just like you're putting the toothpaste back in the tube, man. Like you're just not going to do it. You're too late to this problem to like really nip it in the bud, and now you're just doing cleanup work. But that's a whole nother conversation for another night.
And to connect Pence's speech, though, with the what happened, even more directly, connect Pence's speech to what happened earlier. There are still boogaloo groups on Facebook. And even though Facebook apparently has deemed them to be a dangerous organization, which under their policy means that they're not allowed on their platform, but there's still boogaloo groups on Facebook. And after the information came out about Rittenhouse killing these two protesters, what happened in these groups was two things. One, they're debating. There's some infighting in the boogaloo groups about whether Rittenhouse is a boogaloo or not, because you know how some boogaloo boys love police and some boogaloo boys also actually don't like the police. So there is some disagreement there. But one thing that they were fully on board with, from what I've seen, the screenshots I've seen and what I've seen in these groups, is that they're heralding him as a hero because his actions, committing these violent acts at the protests, get them one step closer to their dreams of a second civil war. So Pence is basically trying to sugarcoat or at least ignore the idea that the officer who died that he mentioned in his speech was killed by the same people who was killed by someone who looks up to who is being looked up to as a hero to the same groups that killed this officer. It's like geez, I mean, when I heard him say that name and I looked up who that officer was, I was just like, wow, could your timing be any worse with this? Really, I mean.
Right. So it looks like we've got somewhere in the ballpark of like 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to run through, any sort of things I thought were notable that we heard during the night that we didn't talk about as main topics. There was so much talk of these protests happening in major American cities like Portland, Seattle, etc. We had Scott Dane, shout out to the loggers of America. We love our loggers, folks. His brag on Trump was that like Trump cut the red tape around, I guess, like protected forest area, which he also, just like the Maine lobster fisherman yesterday, was like admitted in his speech, like, oh yeah, we don't like cut trees down in that area anyway, but like, thank goodness now we're not like forbidden from it or something. I might be misunderstanding that, but that's kind of how it came across.
He blamed Obama and Joe Biden for wildfires.
Yeah.
Which is funny when you actually understand the science of why California is literally burning at times and wildfires are becoming more prevalent in that state. When you understand the science behind it and the contributions from climate change, it's actually quite the opposite. Donald Trump is, if you're going to blame a sitting president for wildfires, it's the one who's denying the causes of these wildfires.
One of my favorite lines was from Senator Marsha Blackburn. She said that leftists want to cancel the police officers. So I'm picturing like all of these, abolish or defund police movements that are going on and these discussions that are happening within sort of the broader progressive left as being reduced down to like tweets that are just like, LA Police Department, you're canceled, bro. Like, I for some reason I just got this like very funny mental image in my head. I may be alone in that.
I always go around canceling the police. I walk down the streets of Manhattan and I see a police officer walking by and I just canceled. Just canceled. That's what I do.
Yeah, and then you get to take his badge after that. So
it's true. It's true. I have in my desk right here just a pile of NYPD badges that I've and there's nothing they can do about it. Obviously, they just that's what happens.
They're canceled. What are they going to do?
That's what happens in Democratic-run cities. Bill de Blasio has deputized everyone to just basically cancel police officers.
Uh, Sister Dee Dee Byrne, that
Right.
the I'm gonna get it wrong. She's not like a nun, is she? I'm not familiar with Catholicism at all.
I mean, I don't know if she is a nun, but there are nuns in the Catholic Church. That is a Catholic thing. I mean,
She's like a superior or something. But
are you saying that she wore the nun outfit as a lie? Like, I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
no, I mean, I'm not saying she's lying. I'm sure that it holds the position related to the church that she says she does. But between Lou Holtz, no relation, and a couple other speakers, this was also a night where they went really hard in on Biden and Harris about their support for women's reproductive health, calling them, the most anti-life presidential ticket ever on the ballot. So I thought that was certainly notable, especially because the anti-abortion movement is still such like a huge animating force in right-wing politics. This is going to resonate with a huge amount of the base.
But and I could say this as a technically still a Catholic, but I have experience. You might not know this, Jared, but I am a former altar server.
I didn't know that. Oh.
And I can tell you from experience that while the Catholic institution is very conservative, a lot of Catholics are Democrats. In fact, I would say the majority of Catholics, and it's not like, it's not like something that's like, 90%, but something probably that's like upper 50s to 60% of Catholics, I think I've seen statistics like that, are Democrats. It's not like the evangelicals where they are, this is a religious, entity that votes Republican. Catholics aren't like that. I mean, to be fair, also the evangelicals don't hold Catholics in very high esteem. So, because Catholics, I guess, are sort of looked at as the as the elitist of Christianity, because they're all from those, a lot of Catholics in New York. So I don't know who they're appealing to there, especially if you have someone like Joe Biden on the ticket, who, one thing Catholics also like is a Catholic to vote for. Look how, I could also tell you that Catholics love their JFK. I mean, because he was a Catholic.
Right. And sort of the last thing I'll bring up as we're starting to close out here is sort of an observation I had tonight. And I guess they've been doing this for a long time, but for some reason something just clicked in my head when I was watching tonight. It seems like the strategy here at the RNC is not to attack Biden on his specific policy proposals. It's to allege that Biden is, in cahoots with the radical left, and then to attack the radical left's, quote unquote radical left's policy proposals. Like the Green New Deal came up a couple times tonight. And I don't think Biden supports the Green New Deal, does he?
No. They are running against a Biden a Trump that doesn't exist is running against a Biden that doesn't exist. This is the fictional election, Jared.
Right. It's like two cosplay versions of each candidate fighting out in the arena. And I guess like politics is always like that to some degree. But this is just, I mean, maybe this was just like because I, got a job writing about politics for a living. I'm plugged into it all the time, and maybe I just notice it more. I'm willing to say maybe that's why I feel like this, but it just seems it's so bizarre feeling, man. It's so bizarre. I wish I had better words for it, but it just feels icky.
It's so the whole thing is bizarre, man. Like the whole thing is just crazy. We're in the third night of an event that basically is talking about a version of the president that doesn't exist. a version of the economy that is no longer and hasn't been for over half a year now. They're talking about a country that doesn't exist. They're talking about an opponent in the presidential election that doesn't exist. It's ludicrous. I mean, Pence was quoting Bernie Sanders to attack Biden. It's like, yeah, but Bernie lost. That's the thing here. Bernie lost because Biden's not going to do what Bernie wants. I wish what you're saying is true, Pence, but it's not. It's not. To some extent, some of them know that, and they're just saying it because they know their base will eat it up, and they're taking advantage of the people who they want to vote for them. And then I do think there are people who don't. I mean, Republicans often do not get the intricacies of the ideological spectrum. That they just look at it as black and white, Republican, Democrat. And it's sort of true that I guess people on the right, I guess unless you're like a Richard Spencer who gets so upset that your party isn't racist enough that you leave the party. But the various right-wing spectrum from, the center right all the way to the far fringe right usually end up just getting on board with their party's decisions. Whereas the left, from center left liberals to, the progressive wing to even the far left, and you have various different subgroups within all of those, they get more, they have a little bit more infighting, I would say, and don't all, hop aboard the same train in the end. And Republicans never seem to pay any attention to that. They never voice any awareness that exists. It's all just, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are the same person. AOC and Nancy Pelosi are the same person. I guess the only people who are different to them are like Ilhan Omar, because they would like to attack her as being an other, as a terrorist. A Muslim woman who is in office. But other than that, to them, pretty much all the Democrats are the same.
Right, and nuance is not advantageous to them. So I don't anticipate that is going to change anytime soon. But I'm looking at the clock here. It looks like we are starting to round out. Do we have any more super chat questions that came in?
We have one more. So let's do that one last. And there's only really two short ones. There's two more short speeches I want to talk about. Do you have like another minute or two? All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So one is I can never say her name, even though she's the White House press secretary. Kayleigh McEnany.
I think that's right.
McEnany. There's an extra N in there, actually. She did the speech that we were talking about yesterday that none of the Trump children gave. The speech that speaks to a personal experience with Donald Trump that should, in essence, bring him give people an empathetic look at him at a human level. And it was how, her it's very, unfortunate story about her history with breast cancer, but her personal experience with Trump is that when she was in the hospital after undergoing her surgery, the Trump family, including Donald Trump, called her to check on how she was doing. And in essence, that should have been what we were talking about yesterday, right? That personal experience. And I'm not going to attack Kayleigh's personal experience here. I'm going to just talk about the purpose of a speech like that and how it didn't deliver. Usually you then take that personal experience and pivot it into how it translates to the broader country. She didn't do that. It was just, this is what happened with me. And that's why I like Donald Trump. Do you know what I mean? It was bizarre. It wasn't like, when the Joe Biden videos and speeches talk about the loss he suffered, it usually then segues into, so Biden knows what it's like for those families who lost loved ones during the coronavirus. Biden understands what it's like to lose a young child to gun violence in a school shooting because he lost a young child in a car accident. Joe Biden there was none of that. It's almost like her experience is so unique that there's no way to really translate it to anything else Trump has done.
Right, exactly. Like it was a very it struck me as still a very insidery kind of story. This wasn't Trump just like checking in on a random American that he heard about and cared so much about. Like this is somebody who was still very much in like the Trump world orbit. And it's like, I'm friends with Trump and he called to see if I was okay after a major surgery. And it's like, well, it's kind of a low bar,
Right. Right.
Well, if one of my friends had a major surgery, I would probably try to check in on them at some point. But
right. That's another really great point.
Just me.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And then the last person I want to talk about, just because I don't really think his speech was anything special, but I think we'd be remiss to not mention him on a night where he had his big speech. And that's old Dan Crenshaw. Just want to put him out there. I mean, every time I see that guy, all I could think of is just how angry I am that he was given a platform on a very popular network television show because they made a joke about him and he whined like a baby about it. So they felt like because of his veteran background, they needed to apologize and put him on air to sort of make him feel better.
What was the joke? Wasn't it that like Dan Crenshaw lost an eye trying to suck his own dick or something like that?
It was something like that. I think they called him a pirate or something like that. I don't even remember what it was because it was so lame and silly and unimportant. Yet the party that loves to shout down cancel culture and every comedian needs to be edgy, and I hate the snowflake comedians that are too afraid to do that, to say what they want to say. They were the first ones to cry about Crenshaw,
It's always how it is, man. It's freedom from speech, not freedom of speech.
Right. So, all right, we got 2 super chat questions here right now. Renee, thoughts on Chicago boy Charlie Kirk's opening up for fascism with his constantly shrinking face? Well, that was on the first night, Renee. I guess you missed us the first night. Yeah, I mean, all I have to say about that, really, I don't really remember what he said too much now that we're in day 3, but I was a little bit, I think I said this that night too, I was surprised that they gave him the opening slot there. I think that was a big, I think that shows, I guess, how much at least the Trump family views Charlie Kirk as perhaps a future big name in the party.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Matt, there that like that opening slot, I mean, that's a primo slot, and Charlie Kirk got it, and then he used it to, ramble on about Trump being like the bodyguard of Christians, or not Christian, but Western civilization. I mistakenly said Christian because I think we all know that's what he means, from all of his rhetoric from years past. And I think kind of in a way, what Charlie Kirk talked about in kind of maybe more explicit terms is kind of the main theme of what we've seen going through this convention, that America is in an existential crisis against forces that seek to change it forever. And the only way to preserve America from those who wish to replace it, that old dog whistle, is to vote for Trump again.
Right. And here's the final super chat of the night. Rexol has a question for the both of us, Jared. Are you ready to answer this?
Let's go.
Are you guys Antifa?
I would consider myself opposed to fascism. I'm not a part of like any sort of organized Antifa, whatever.
Jared, don't be so modest. Folks, you are looking at the leader of the Antifa movement right here. Jared Holt. He is
Antifa super soldier. It's one of those things.
He's the original Antifa super soldier. When the ooze fell into the sewer, he was the first person to become the Antifa super soldier. I am also an anti-fascist. I am also Antifa. So, yeah, I mean, again, there is no, when you say, are you guys Antifa, it's basically, are you guys anti-fascist? And
Yeah, and
unless,
I think any patriot who loves this country should be anti-fascist.
right,
Have fought 2 world wars over this shit. Let's not do it again.
right, exactly, Jared. And with that, we got, oh, wait, someone made the point that this isn't a super chat, but I think it's a good point to make. Kaylee actually attributed her experience to pre-existing conditions and mentioned how it was Trump who was fighting to cover pre-existing conditions, which I feel like I couldn't let slide here without us mentioning it. It's an absolute lie. There couldn't be anything further from the truth. Usually, the Republicans like to bend the truth and lie about things that they don't support. But in this case, they are lying about something that they actively oppose. I mean, it's something I just can't let stand, so I had to mention that there. The Trump administration is actually the administration, the Republican Party as a whole, is the party that actually has fought to actually take away the coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, healthcare coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. Nothing could be further from the truth.
And I haven't checked on this in a while, but last I heard, the Trump administration was actually in court trying to argue why it should be able to rip apart parts of the ACA. So that's absolutely ludicrous.
Right. And look at that, Tina, who gave us that comment. I guess the live stream was a little bit delayed. She literally just sent that same comment as a super chat. Little did she know she could have got it for free. But thank you, Tina, for the support. I appreciate it. It's what? How does that Alanis Morissette song go again? It's a free ride when you've already paid. There you go, Tina. That's you today. Isn't it ironic?
Hey, man, she's got a brief musical performance from you. I think that's worth something.
Hell yeah. So folks, let's do the plugs and we'll see you tomorrow. Matt Binder of Doomed, youtube.com/Matt Binder. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I live stream every week, or like this week, multiple times a week for special events like the RNC. You can check out the audio version of the podcast at doomedpod.com. Find me on any social media platform. Just search Matt Binder. I'll come up if I'm not at Matt Binder on the platform, which I usually am. And what's the other thing I usually... Oh, yeah. Patreon.com/Matt Binder. If you can financially support this show. I've been very happy with the growth of the patrons in the past couple of weeks. I really appreciate the support. And if we could keep that going, because I know what's going to happen is when you get into that weird lull where you get stuck at a certain number for some reason. You can't get out of it. Don't want to do that. So patreon.com/Matt Binder. Only if you could afford to do so. If not... subscribe to the YouTube channel or the iTunes podcast. It's free. Go ahead, Jared.
You can check out Shitpost. We do, weekly to bi-weekly releases depending on topics or sort of source material. You can find the podcast at Substack, shtpost.substack.com. There you can get email alerts for every new episode, and if you should choose to be so generous, you can financially support the show. It's something I really appreciate. It helps me with production cost and hosting fees. And eventually I want to get to the point where I can be producing bonus content, be compensating guests for their appearance on that bonus content. So, that's kind of the direction we're heading there. If you're listening to this on a podcast player, the best thing you could do for me right now is jump in the review section and tell me why I suck. 1 star. Spam it all the way down. Tell me Q is real. Tell me that, I will be censored next from Twitter because apparently I'm responsible for all these bans. And just own me mercilessly online. I want to squeal like a piggy. Just destroy me.
I feel like I just want to say here, to my future guests on my podcast, on my show, don't get any ideas from Jared. There'll be no payments for coming on this show. Excuse you. What are you trying to do here? No, but actually, I want to say here that to those of you who are watching this and maybe just discovered Jared from the show, or just discovered me from Jared's upload of the show on his podcast, we may both be covering the right. But I would say if you look at the episodes of our shows, there's usually very little overlap in terms of the stories we cover that week. There's just so much happening, and we just sometimes we cover the same thing, but oftentimes we're hitting on completely different topics. So if you feel like, I'll just subscribe to one because the other's not going to, the other's going to be this, that's not the truth at all. We're not there. You will get two very different shows from both Doomed and Shitpost, and I think both are worth listening to. There you go. Just wanted to do that. Just wanted to plug both of us. I'm being nice, Jared. Get in a little plug in for you.
We gotta put on the car salesman outfit and pull up in the golf cart and be like, "Can I help you today? Are you looking to support any podcasts?" Or
all right, there you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Matt Binder of Doomed,
and I'm Jared Holt of Shitpost. Thank you sincerely for keeping up with this coverage. Hopefully this is helpful, and if anything, you didn't have to listen to the RNC for 3 hours today, did you?
Right, and you won't have to think about it this way. Tune in tomorrow to our final night of doing this, our final night of coverage of the RNC, and you won't even have to listen to Trump. You could avoid his speech, and you'll get everything you need to know about it from this program.
Yeah, we'll do our very best. I do imagine that tomorrow night we are going to go past our little hour time slot that we've been aiming for every night. But it's going to be good. I think we're going to sort of branch out, talk about the overarching themes, and then, of course, that Trump speech is just going to be plenty of fodder to talk about.
Yeah, well, looking forward to doing it tomorrow, buddy. Have a good night. Get a good night's rest. You're gonna need it for tomorrow. Strap in, folks, because tomorrow we're going to have to become temporary passengers of the Trump train.
All right. Take care, everybody. Cut us off.